Coming from a heavy Selenium user in the past, Playwright is my go-to framework today for browser automation and web scraping for dynamic websites. If you don't know what Playwright is an open source automation framework for web testing and browser automation. You can use Playwright with Chrome, Firefox, and WebKit. In some of the browser automation use cases like web scraping dynamic websites, automate data entry, screenshot capture, PDF generation, file download, and mimicking user behavior on a web page are some of the things we can do with Playwright. The course is aiming for beginner and intermediate Python users who have zero and some experience with Playwright. That means as long as you have experience using Python, by the end of this video, you'll learn everything you need to know to automate most of the web browser tasks to streamline your workflow. Now, let's review the agenda for the Playwright course. We'll start by setting up the Python environment, then gradually go to different examples on how to control a web browser. And to finish up, I'll share a few practical examples to automate some of the common tasks. Because there are so many things you can do with Playwright, for the lessons, these are the topics I think are most important for browser automation. I may add a few things here and there where I see fit. With that being said, let's dive into the tutorial. Let's create a Python filter environment to isolate the Python dependencies from other projects. Launch your terminal and run the command python-m vmv followed by the environment name. Cd into the project directory and activate the environment. For the crash course, I'll be using two Python libraries, Playwright and Beautiful Soup. To install the Python packages, run the command pip install Playwright Beautiful Soup 4. Once we have Playwright installed, we can now install the browsers by running the command Playwright install. To ensure that Playwright is installed successfully, run the command Playwright -- version to print the Playwright version. That's everything for the setup. Let's learn how to use Playwright in Python. For this lesson, we'll learn Playwright basics by launching a browser and navigate to a website. To start out, import time module, which we'll use to delay code execution, and sync Playwright from Playwright.sync API. Playwright also supports asynchronous routines using async IO, which I'll cover in a separate lesson later. Next, we'll define the URL we want to visit. To launch Playwright, we'll start a Playwright session by calling the sync Playwright.start method. With Playwright running, we can now launch a browser. Playwright supports multiple browser engines, Chrome, Firefox, and WebKit. In this example, I'm using Firefox in non-headless mode, meaning to display the browser window. If you set the headless mode to true, the browser will run in the background without the browser showing. Next, create a new page in our browser. A page is the same thing as a tab. In the page object, this is where we can set various options for the page session. In this case, I'm enabling JavaScript and setting a custom viewport size. Noticing that I have set a very small viewport size of 200 by 100 pixels. This is just for demonstration purpose. In a real scenario, you'll likely want a larger viewport. Once the page is set up, we can navigate to the target URL using the page.goto method. In this case, the Craigslist website. The page goto method has three wait types: load, DOM content loader, and network idle. Finally, after we perform all the actions, we need to clean up by closing the page, the browser, and stopping Playwright session. To ensure we don't close the page immediately, we can add a 10 seconds delay using time.sleep. And this is the Playwright workflow to control a browser. Now save the file and run the script. Here, Playwright will first launch a Firefox browser. Create a new tab, navigate to Craigslist website, wait 10 seconds, then close everything. To keep the code clean, we can refactor the script into functions for reusability. This covers the first lesson. For the next lesson, we'll learn how to interact with page elements, extra pages HTML markup, use browser context to create multiple independent browser sessions, and the handling scroll bars. In this lesson, we will learn how to interact with page elements like input fields, drop-downs, checkboxes, scroll bars, buttons, and the browser context by automating an apartment search on Craigslist. Let's start with learning how to enter a search query in an input field. On Craigslist's website, hover your mouse to the input field, right-click, and select Inspect. A developer tool window will pop up and highlight the selected HTML element. And to control the input field, we first need to figure out how to create a reference to the element in our Python script. There are a few ways we can create an element reference. My preferred approach is to use XPath query. XPath query is out of scope. If you want to learn how to use XPath query, I've included a tutorial link in the description below. I highly recommend you learn XPath query, or at least to a proficient level if you want to do more advanced stuff with browser automation and web scraping. As for my workflow, what I usually do is, in a regular browser, I will navigate to the web page, examine the target HTML element, and figure out the XPath query to locate the element. Back to the Python script. To map the workflow, I will create a variable to define the XPath query to locate the input element from the home page. Then use the waitForSelector method from the page object to wait until the target element is visible. Then create the input element reference using page query selector based on the input XPath query. If the input element is not found based on the XPath query I provided, the input element will return nothing. In that case, we can use an if statement to say if input element is created, search the term apartment using the fill method, then press the enter key with the press method. The waitForLoadState method ensures the result page is loaded first until we move to the next action. On Craigslist, I'm going to manually run through a simulation of the steps I want to automate using Playwright. In the search box, search for apartment. On this page, we have a filter panel element on the left to set the filters, and a list element containing the result items on the right. Let's say from the filter setting, I want to check the posted today checkbox. Noticing when I click the checkbox, the result page will refresh. This is pretty important because in Playwright, when a page is refreshed, you need to recreate or reattach an element reference in Python. And in the dropdown, I want to select within 30 days and click the apply button. Then I want to click the first result and save the page as a HTML file in my project directory as the last step. To mimicking the steps using Playwright, create a variable to store the panel's XPath query. Then use waitForSelector to wait until the element is visible and use page.locator to create the object reference to the filter panel element. Here I am using the locator method to create a reference to the panel element instead of using query selector. And that's because locator allows you to work with dynamic elements with features like auto-weighting, multi-element handles, and element reattachment versus query selector is a lower level method to work with the first element it finds, and is easier to use but less powerful. To check if the panel element is found, from the search panel object, we need to check if element count is greater than 0. If the condition is met, create a variable to store the checkbox XPath query, and use wait for selector to wait for the element to appear, and use locator to create an object reference. To toggle a checkbox, we can use the isChecks method to get the checkbox state, then set the checkbox state using the if statement. During the simulation, when I check the Posted Today checkbox, the page refreshes. When a page is refreshed, all the element reference will get deattached automatically. Here we can reattach the search panel element by calling the element handle method. To click select the dropdown, we need to ensure the dropdown is visible on the page. What we can do here is, on the panel element, we can scroll to the bottom first, where the dropdown is visible. To scroll a page in Playwright, we can use page evaluate method to run the JavaScript code to the search panel element. To select an item from a dropdown, create the XPath query variable. Create an object reference to the dropdown element, and use select option to choose the dropdown item. You can use either an option index position or dropdown label based on your preference. To press the apply button, create the XPath query variable. Create an object reference to the button element, and use click method to click the apply button. After we apply the filters, locate the first result item using XPath query and query selector method, and click on the first item to the target page. To save the page as a HTML file, create a function called SavePageHTML with parameters page and file. Inside the function, we can return the HTML markup using content method from the page argument and save it as a HTML file. To finish up, call the SavePageHTML function and pass the page object and file path as arguments. To test the script, save the file and run the script. If you type everything correctly, you should see a browser pop up, simulating all the actions we instructed in the script, and save the output HTML file in the target directory. To verify, open the HTML file and check if the page is saved correctly. That's all for the elements handling. Now let's look at how we can use browser context to create multiple browser sessions. In Playwright, a browser context is an isolated environment within a browser instance that allows you to run tasks or automate tasks as if they were running in a separate independent browser sessions. That means each browser instance has its own cookies, storage, and session data to allow you to simulate multiple users or scenarios within a single browser instance. This is extremely useful for web scraping tasks. To demonstrate how to create a browser context, in the example here, we can use the new context method to initialize browser instance to create a new browser session, and the rest was like a regular browser object. If I run the script, you open two browser instances independently. This covers everything for this lesson, which should give you an idea on how to automate control elements on a web page. For the next lesson, we'll learn how to capture screenshots and the handling file downloads. For this lesson, we will learn how to take a screenshot and download file in Playwright. Taking a screenshot is relatively easy in Playwright. To take a screenshot from the page object, which represents the web page itself, we can call the screenshot method. In the method, we can define the file path where the screenshot will be saved. If you want to take a screenshot of the entire page, set the full page value to true. Otherwise, it'll only take a screenshot of the visible area. We can also remove the background when taking a screenshot This setting works only when you set the screenshot type to PNG. And quality is the quality of the image. The value is between 0 to 100. Now save the file and run the script. When the script finishes, you should see the screenshot of the entire page exported. Now let's move on to file download. To download a file in Playwright, first, we need to locate the link to trigger the download. Now, let's say I want to download the image PNG file. To download a file, define the XPath query and wait until the element is visible. Then start the download event with expect download method. Inside the download info context, perform the download action that initiates download. When file download is initiated, from the download info object, call the value attribute to wait until download is complete. From the download object, we can get the file name encoded in the download link. Then use the save as method to save the file. Now, if I run the script, it will save the image in my project directory when the script finishes. And this covers everything for handling media files. For the next lesson, we will learn how to use Playwright to control mouse interactions. In this lesson, we will learn how to control your mouse in Playwright. This is going to be the last lesson for the crash course. After reviewing the agenda, I realized device emulation, auto-weighting strategies, and efficient weight management are a bit too advanced, which I will cover them in examples separately in other videos. Now, to demonstrate how to control a mouse in Playwright, here on the Click Speed Test website, I want to simulate the mouse click to perform the mouse click test. Go ahead, define the XPath query. Wait until the element is visible, then construct the button element. To click in the correct position, we first need to retrieve the bounding box of the button element, then extract the coordinate and dimension. To simultaneously click nonstop for 5 seconds, insert a for while loop and use page mouse double click with the location provided to perform the click action continuously. To view the result after the test is finished, here I will insert the input function. Now run the script. On the website, you should see the mouse click action is being performed until the while loop condition test fails. If you want to hold a mouse key for X amount of seconds, call the page mouse down method to hold the mouse button and page mouse up to release the button. And this covers everything for this lesson. If you have any question related to Playwright, please post your question in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe the channel for more tutorials like this. Happy coding, see you in the next one.